I knew something was wrong the moment my daughter closed the door, but I didn't expect to hear the click. That sharp final sound like someone locking a storage shed, not a mother's bedroom. Her hand didn't even tremble. Mine did. "Mom, it's just for tonight," Lindsay said, slipping my own keys into her coat pocket as if they'd always belonged to her. "You get confused in the dark. I don't want you wandering around and hurting yourself. At 74, I have heard many lies in my life, but none delivered as calmly as that one." I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to her footsteps fade down the hall. My house creaked, the way it always did in the evenings, the wooden beams shifting as the night temperature dropped. I built this home with my husband, board by board, shovel of dirt by shovel of dirt. Back then, the land felt like ours in a way nothing else had ever been. We dug the first fence posts together. We planted the first trees with our own blistered hands. We watched this place grow like a second life, but tonight it didn't feel like mine at all. Outside my window, I could see the porch light flickering through the branches of the old elm. I had always loved that tree. My husband Tom used to trim the lower branches every spring. A tree knows who its people are. He'd say, "You take care of it. It takes care of you." I wondered if he'd say the same about children. My bedroom door rattled slightly as if testing my resolve. I walked to it slowly, my joints protesting, and tried the door knob, even though I knew it wouldn't turn. Locked by my daughter from the outside in my own home. How strange to realize that the people you raise can look at you one day and decide you're no longer a person, just a problem. I sat back on the bed. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the sachet I kept in my dresser since Tom died. He always said it helped him sleep. Tonight, it didn't help me at all. Lindsay had been circling the idea of taking over for months, though she disguised it as concern. "Mom, the house is too big for you. Mom, all this land is wasted on one old woman. Mom, maybe it's time to think about assisted living." That phrase always clung to her tongue like a sour candy. Assisted living. As if I hadn't been assisting myself perfectly well for decades. As if she hadn't been coming here only when she needed something. Usually money, sometimes approval, never just me. I heard her downstairs now, opening drawers, moving things, shuffling through papers. She pretended to organize for my sake. I imagined her at my desk, rifling through envelopes with her impatient fingers. She thought my documents were all in that desk. She thought she understood the layout of this home. She thought she knew me. People often mistake quietness for weakness. They don't realize that silence is where we sharpen our understanding. I learned that from years of living with the land. Soil doesn't argue. It simply tells the truth to anyone patient enough to listen. The hinges gave a soft sigh as the house cooled further. I wrapped my shawl tighter. I wasn't frightened. What I felt was heavier than fear, something colder, something I'd been avoiding for years. Recognition, maybe. A quiet acknowledgement that my daughter had been drifting away from me long before she locked that door. A faint clatter came from downstairs, a metal drawer closing, then another. She was searching for something specific, my property deed, most likely the one she believed she could manage for me. The one she assumed had both our names. The one she didn't know had been rewritten after Tom's death with the help of a very thorough lawyer. I looked at the narrow shadow under the locked door. Lindsay thought she had trapped me, but I'd lived too long, lost too much, and buried too many fears to be scared by a lock. The night stretched on, quiet and steady, as if the house itself were waiting with me. I pressed my palm to the wooden door, feeling the grain beneath my skin, remembering how Tom sanded it himself to make sure it closed without sticking. This was my home, my room, my life. And though I didn't yet know what the morning would bring, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Lindsay had made a very big mistake tonight. When I was younger, I used to think land was just dirt, a surface to stand on, nothing more. But the older I became, the more I understood what Tom always meant when he said, "Land remembers who worked for it." Maybe that was why I fought so hard for this place, harder than I ever fought for myself, and maybe that was why Lindsay wanted it. She didn't always, of course. There was a time when she loved running here barefoot, dragging her little red wagon through the garden beds, collecting rocks she believed were treasures. I can still see her hair tangled from the wind, hear her laughter echoing across the yard. When did that child disappear? When did she become a woman who saw this land not as home but as an asset? I sat by the locked door listening to the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the faint rustling of Lindsay moving through my house. It's strange how a sound that once meant family now felt like intrusion. My mind drifted back to the early days, the first spring after Tom and I bought the property. The house was half the size it is now. The windows rattled in the wind, and the plumbing groaned at night like an old man complaining. But we didn't mind. We slept on a mattress on the floor, waking at sunrise to repair broken beams, plant saplings, mend fences. We worked until our hands cracked and bled, and then we worked some more. Those were the years when life was hard, but simple. And Lindsay was still small enough to think her parents were made of iron. Tom used to say, "A home is built twice, first with lumber, then with loyalty." I suppose that's why tonight cut so deep, not because I feared what Lindsay would do, but because I realized loyalty wasn't something she felt anymore. I shifted a little, my knees aching. At my age, even sitting still has consequences. The room was cold, as if the house sensed my unease. I looked toward the window. The moon was bright, silvering the yard and lighting the path Tom built from river stones he carried one by one. Lindsay once asked why he didn't just hire someone. "Work done by someone else doesn't hold your memories," he told her. She didn't understand then. I'm not sure she ever did. Over the years, I watched her world grow sharper, faster, more material. She left for college, talking about internships and promotions. She came home for holidays, complaining about colleagues and traffic. She married a man who spoke of investments more than people. Somewhere along that timeline, the tenderness in her voice thinned. A distance formed that neither of us acknowledged. It was easier that way to pretend the cold wasn't forming between us, but it was inch by inch. The house remembers that, too. I heard a drawer slam downstairs, harder this time. Lindsay must have realized I hadn't kept my documents where she expected. She thinks she's organized, but she only understands order when she creates it herself. She never understood that some things aren't hidden. They're simply protected. A faint ache tightened behind my ribs. Not fear, disappointment, a slow, deliberate kind that settles deep. Because no matter how strained our relationship became, I never believed she would cross a line like this. Locking your own mother in a room is something you read about in newspapers with strangers' names attached, not your child's. I got up and walked to the dresser. My reflection in the mirror startled me. The hard set of my mouth, the exhaustion around my eyes. I looked older tonight, but also clearer, as if something inside me had sharpened. On the dresser sat a small wooden box Tom carved for me, the year Lindsay was born. Inside were letters, photographs, and the first copy of the property deed. The paper had yellowed over the years, but the ink remained strong. Margaret Ellery, sole owner. Later, we added Tom's name, then removed it again after he passed. But Lindsay's name was never written there, not once. The house creaked again, a long, slow groan that traveled through the floorboards like a warning. Then I heard Lindsay speaking on the phone, her voice clipped and irritated. "No, she doesn't understand what's best for her. Yes, I'll handle it in the morning. Handle it as if I were an overdue bill." I sat back on my bed and folded my hands in my lap. The night outside felt endless, but I wasn't restless anymore. A strange calm washed over me, the kind you feel when the truth finally settles into place. Lindsay didn't lock me in because she was worried. She locked me in because she believed she could decide my life for me, because she thought I had grown small enough to be managed. She forgot who I am. And somewhere deep down, I felt something stubborn and old rise inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. The quiet, immovable part of myself that learned to survive widowhood financial strain storms that tore down half our yard and a grief that lived in the walls long after Tom was gone. The same part of me that would not, under any circumstances, be handled. The house settled again. The land breathed beneath it, and I realized the truth Lindsay would learn soon enough. You cannot take from someone what they built with their whole life. Not with a lock, not with a lie, not even with the authority of being their daughter. Morning would come, and with it, consequences. By the time the house went silent, I already knew Lindsay had taken more than just my bedroom keys. There was a heaviness in the air, a stillness that didn't belong to night, but to intention. Her intention. I eased myself off the bed and moved toward the door again, touching the cool metal of the handle. Locked. The kind of lock meant to keep things in, not out. I wondered if she realized how symbolic that was. A daughter locking away the very woman who carried her into this world. Downstairs. Something scraped across the floor, the sound of my desk chair being dragged. She never handled furniture gently. She moved through life the way she moved through my house now, taking up space without asking whether she had the right. Papers rustled, the desk drawer opened. I could picture it. Her hand diving into the jumble of envelopes and notepads, convinced she would find neatly labeled folders waiting to make her plan easier. Lindsay always believed other people should be as organized as she imagined herself to be. A few seconds later came the sharp clack of metal, the lockbox. My heart sank a little. She had found it. Damn thing, she muttered, her voice rising. The code, of course, wouldn't work for her. It was Tom's birthday. No one knew that except me. She tried again and again, each failure louder than the last, a growing irritation. Not fear, not guilt. Irritation, as though I were being deliberately difficult. Why does she make everything so complicated? She hissed into the quiet room. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. That was always her refrain, wasn't it? Why do I make things complicated? Why don't I listen more? Why don't I let her help me? The truth was simple. Help isn't help when it comes with chains. After a few minutes, the rustling stopped. I heard her footsteps move to the hall closet, the one where I kept blankets and old coats. She was searching for something else now, probably the spare keys. She hadn't realized I moved them years ago after the first time she insisted I shouldn't be alone in this house. People think controlling behavior begins with shouting or aggression. They don't understand. It starts with concern that grows teeth. Lindsay's footsteps quickened. She opened the pantry, the linen cabinet, even the laundry room. Every door, every drawer, every container she thought would give her control. Then she came back upstairs. Her steps slowed near my bedroom door. "Mom," she called softly. Her voice was too sweet. I could hear the honey dripping from it, the kind she used when she wanted something. "How are you doing in there as well as someone can do when locked in her own room?" I replied. A tiny pause. Embarrassment. No calculation. "Mom, you know this is for your safety." I walked closer to the door. If safety were your concern, you'd sit with me, not lock me away, like an inconvenience. Another pause. Then her tone hardened. "I can't sit with you all night. I've got things to take care of, such as preparing the documents she thought I would sign in the morning." "Get some sleep," she added, and I could hear her turning away, already finished with the performance of concern. "We'll talk tomorrow when you're rested." Rested as if exhaustion were my problem. Her footsteps faded again, and soon I heard the unmistakable click of my front door's lock rotating not once but twice. But Lindsay was securing the house from the inside. She didn't trust me not to leave my room, but she trusted no one else to enter. I sat down on the edge of the bed again, staring into the dimness. The darkness felt familiar, almost comforting. I had sat with darkness plenty of nights. Nights after Tom died. Nights after Lindsay's sharp words left wounds that didn't show on skin. But this darkness had shape. It had intention. It had my daughter's face. I heard paper tearing somewhere downstairs, then a zippered pouch, the one that held my checkbook. She opened it, sighing with frustration. No checks. I had moved them months ago. She didn't know where. She didn't know a lot of things. She didn't know the deed wasn't in the lockbox. She didn't know the trust documents were not in the desk drawer. She didn't know that last year, after she pressured me to choose a retirement home brochure, just in case I made an appointment with an attorney instead. She didn't know I'd learned to stop being naive. The stairs creaked again. Lindsay came up to the landing, breathed heavily for a moment, then spoke through the door. Not angry, not worried, just tired of being inconvenienced. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm trying to fix your life before things get worse. Before things get worse. She meant before I make decisions she can't control. She meant before the land becomes legally unreachable. She meant before I stop complying. I didn't answer. Silence unsettled her more than my words ever could. Finally, she sighed and walked away. A door closed. The guest room. She'd sleep there tonight under the quilt I made when she was pregnant with her own daughter. That quilt had comforted her once. Now it comforted a woman who saw me as an obstacle. I lay down on the bed. My body was tired, but something inside me was wide awake. A steady, rising clarity. Lindsay believed she had the upper hand because she had the keys. But keys don't determine ownership. Locks don't determine power. And mourning doesn't always bring the results people expect. Tonight, she took my freedom for a few hours. Tomorrow, she would learn what she had never bothered to ask. This house is mine. This land is mine. And my life, despite her efforts, is still mine to decide. The hours after midnight have a strange way of stretching themselves, thin like old fabric pulled too tight. They don't pass so much as linger, especially when you're locked in your own room listening to a house that was once yours shift under someone else's intentions. Sleep wouldn't come. It hovered near me, then moved away whenever I closed my eyes. So I sat in the rocking chair Tom built, pulling my shawl close around my shoulders. The chair creaked softly the way it always had, like a gentle protest. I used to rock Lindsay in this very chair when she was colicky as a baby. Back then, she clung to me as if I were her whole world. Funny how easily children forget who kept them alive in those early years. A cold draft slid across the floor, creeping up my ankles. The old house had always breathed at night, but tonight it felt different, like it was waiting for my decision as much as I was. Homes develop loyalties. This one had mine. Lindsay never understood that. To her, walls were walls, floors were floors, and land was a commodity. Something that could be leveraged, improved on, sold, used. Sometimes I wondered if that difference was my fault. Maybe I raised her in comfort for too long. Maybe she never learned what struggle does to a person, how it humbles you, shapes you, teaches you where your true roots are. A soft thump came from downstairs, a cupboard closing. She was still awake, still searching, still convinced the world would bend to her if she stayed determined long enough. But life never bent for me or Tom. We bent for it. There's a difference. I let my mind wander because what else can a woman do in a locked room at 2 a.m? I remembered the years after Tom passed. Quiet, aching years when Lindsay called every day at first, then every week, then only when she needed something. Mom, could you watch the kids? Mom, could you spot us a little for the roof repair? "Mom, can you look at this document for me?" And I did. Always. I told myself it was what mothers were for, but somewhere along the way, helping became expected, then demanded, then taken for granted. And somewhere inside myself, I stopped noticing the shift. Grief does that. It numbs you until one day you realize you've been giving pieces of yourself away without noticing how small you've become. Another sound drifted upstairs, the quiet rustle of paper. She was looking again. She wouldn't find what mattered. I had made sure of that long ago. Tom used to say, if you can't trust someone with your time, don't trust them with your property. It sounded harsh back then. Now it sounded like foresight. I rose from the chair, walked to the window, and pulled the curtains slightly aside. The yard glowed under the moonlight. The elm tree swayed gently, its branches moving like an old friend reaching out. Tom buried our dog under that tree. He planted roses around the grave. When Lindsay grew up and declared she didn't see the point of sentimental plants, I let her words pass through me like wind. Not everything needs to be explained to be sacred. Standing there in the dim light, I felt a stillness settle over my chest. Not resignation, but clarity. A kind I hadn't felt in years. I was done pretending, done shrinking myself so my daughter could feel large, done apologizing for existing in the home I built. Lindsay didn't lock me away because she worried I'd fall. She locked me away because she wanted freedom to take what she had already decided was hers. The truth felt heavy, but solid as stone in the palm. I sat back down, pulling the blanket over my legs. There was a moment, a brief quiet one, when a flicker of doubt touched me. What if I was too harsh in my thoughts? What if Lindsay was overwhelmed, misguided, desperate rather than malicious? What if she believed she was truly helping me? But then I remembered the text messages she didn't think I saw last month. Messages to a realtor friend of hers. Once I convince her to move the property, won't be hard to unload. Unload as if the home I lived in for 40 years were a piece of old furniture cluttering her future. No, my doubt didn't last long. The floorboards creaked somewhere near the staircase, Lindsay moving again. Then her voice floated up, muffled but sharp. "It's not like she can stop me," she said to someone on the phone. "She won't even realize what's happening until it's done." I didn't hear the other side of the conversation, but her tone tightened. "No, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm taking control tomorrow. This is the only way." Control. That word again. I'd heard it for months. Not from her directly, but in every suggestion she made, every decision she tried to make for me. Every sigh of frustration when I dared to disagree. The years have taught me many lessons, but one above all. When someone tries to control your life, it's usually because they've lost control of their own. I leaned back in the rocking chair and let the night settle around me. I wasn't afraid, not anymore. Something steadier had taken its place. The realization that Lindsay forgot a simple truth. A lifetime of being quiet does not mean you are powerless. It only means you've been waiting for the right moment to speak, and the morning would bring that moment. She thought the lock on my bedroom door was her victory. Tomorrow she would learn that it was only the start of her undoing. Morning announced itself long before the sun, not with light, but with sounds. Lindsay's hurried footsteps, downstairs cabinet doors opening and closing. The impatient scrape of a chair against tile. I'd lived long enough to recognize the rhythm of a person who wasn't preparing breakfast, but preparing an argument. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Some nights aren't for resting, they're for reckoning. The first true light slipped through my curtains around 6, pale and cold like winter coming early. I folded my blanket neatly and placed it at the foot of the bed. I wanted to meet the day standing, not sitting. When the lock finally turned, It echoed through the room sharper than it had the night before. Lindsay opened the door halfway, just enough to look inside without truly entering. "Morning, Mom," she said with a brightness that belonged more to a realtor showing a house than a daughter addressing her mother. "Did you sleep?" Her eyes didn't wait for an answer. They scanned the room, checking whether I had tried to force the door climb out the window or rearrange anything. She looked at me like she was surveying damage. "I slept enough," I replied. "Good," she said briskly. "We've got a lot to talk about." She stepped aside, motioning for me to come out, as if the hallway were her domain and I were a guest. Her posture told me everything. She believed she had the advantage, and why wouldn't she? She'd spent the night rewriting the narrative in her mind. She wasn't the villain. She was the responsible daughter. She wasn't imprisoning me. She was managing a situation. She wasn't taking from me. She was helping me make adult decisions. I walked past her slowly, deliberately, not because my joints hurt. They did, but because I refused to rush for a woman who locked me in a bedroom. She followed me downstairs, speaking before my foot even touched the last step. "I need you to listen with an open mind this morning," she began. "I know last night seemed dramatic, but sometimes you have to take firm steps to protect someone you love. Protect." There was that word again, stretched thin from overuse. In the kitchen, a stack of papers lay on the table, arranged neatly as if for a client meeting. Contracts, estimates, brochures. Her whole strategy laid out like breakfast. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. Lindsay slipped into her role effortlessly. She smoothed her blouse, straightened the papers, and lifted her chin. "Mom, I talked to some people last night." She began tapping the first document. "Professionals, the market is strong right now and your house could sell for a significant amount. More than enough to secure you a comfortable place at Willow Ridge Assisted Living." I raised an eyebrow. "You spoke to professionals about selling my home while I was locked in my room." She flushed faintly but pressed on. "I needed to be prepared. This is a big step for both of us, not both of us for her." She slid the first document toward me. "This is the preliminary evaluation. A highly reputable agent came by last month, and I don't recall inviting anyone I said." "You didn't need to," she replied quickly. "I gave permission because in her mind, my life was an extension of hers." She moved to the next stack of papers. "This is a placement brochure for Willow Ridge. They have excellent medical care social programs, on-site transport." "I'm not moving," I said plainly. She blinked as if I'd interrupted her mid-sentence in a language she didn't understand. "Mom, you have to be realistic. This property is too much for you. The land alone requires maintenance you can't keep up with. And what happens if you fall? What happens if I've been maintaining this land for 40 years? I said, "Yes, but you're 74. She snapped, her patience fraying. "We can't pretend you're the same woman you used to be." There it was, the thing she'd wanted to say for months. I looked at her across the table, the sharp lines of her face, the tightness in her jaw, the restless tapping of her fingers. She wasn't thinking about my safety. She was thinking about efficiency, convenience, profit. She pushed a pen toward me. "Let's just sign the evaluation paperwork. It doesn't mean you're selling yet. It just lets us move forward." Us. I didn't touch the pen. She didn't notice the deliberate stillness of my hands. She was too busy imagining the ink on the page. "Mom, refusing to do this won't make you younger," she said softly, leaning closer. "You need to trust me. I'm trying to make sure everything is in order before it's too late." Before it's too late, for whom she took a breath. "Look, once we start the sale process, there will be no sale process," I said. She froze. "What, I'm not selling the house," I repeated calmly. "Not now, not ever." For a moment, she looked genuinely stunned, as though she couldn't fathom a scenario where my will opposed hers. "Mom, be sensible. You don't understand." I understand perfectly, I said. That's why we're having this conversation. Her expression shifted. Disbelief shrinking into irritation, irritation hardening into something colder. You're making a mistake, she said quietly, a mistake that affects everyone. No, I replied. Only you. Her jaw tightened. She reached for another document, ready to try a different angle, a different pressure point, but she wasn't ready for the truth waiting just behind her assumptions. She thought she'd come into this morning with control. She had no idea control had never belonged to her in the first place. Lindsay liked to believe she handled everything with precision, but she never noticed details unless they benefited her. So when she slid the next document toward me, a stapled packet with highlighted sections, she didn't realize the mistake she'd already made. This is just the preliminary authorization, she said, tapping the top page. It lets the agent access property records and begin the evaluation. Nothing binding. I looked down at the packet without touching it. The first page was printed last night, the ink still slightly raised. You typed this yourself, I said. Lindsay stiffened. I filled in the necessary parts. Yes, it's standard. It's not a standard form. Mom, don't start picking at technicalities. She rolled her eyes, irritation slipping through the cracks in her polished tone. It's a simple document. It just gets the ball rolling. She didn't hear how she spoke to me. Not like a daughter, but like someone instructing a client too old to understand her own interests. I want you to sign here, she said, sliding the pen forward again. Her nails were painted a sharp winter white. I remembered when she used to chew them down to nothing during exams. Now they were perfect, manicured, controlled an image she worked hard to maintain. I didn't pick up the pen. Instead, I looked at the name printed at the top of the form, Lindsay A. Rowan, Authorized Family Representative. Who authorized you, I asked. She blinked, once, twice. What? This line, I said, tapping it gently, where it says, you're the representative. Who appointed you? She sighed as if I were being deliberately obtuse. Mom, it doesn't matter. It's just wording. Everyone expects a family representative when dealing with older clients. Older clients? I repeated softly. She didn't even hear herself. I'm not signing. Her patience snapped so quickly I could almost hear it. Oh, for God's sake, Mom, she said sharply. Why do you always make everything harder? I'm trying to help you. I've spent half the night arranging things you should have arranged years ago. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The tight lines around her mouth, the hollow beneath her eyes, where ambition had carved out space for itself. The desperate energy of someone convinced their future depended on the decisions they forced onto others. Your help, I said calmly, seems to benefit one person. That's not true. It is, and it's you. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't deny it the second time. She reached into her tote bag, the big structured one she always carried, and pulled out a thin manila folder. She opened it with a flourish as if she were about to reveal a brilliant surprise. A buyer is already interested, she said. My stomach tightened, not with fear, with clarity. You found a buyer before talking to me. I had to move quickly, she insisted. Properties like this don't stay available long. The housing market is volatile. Timing is everything. Timing, I repeated. And money, don't forget money. Her eyes flashed. Don't twist this. I'm doing what's necessary. You can't keep living on a property you can't maintain. The land is too much for you. The taxes are too much for you. The upkeep is too much for you. You don't know anything about the taxes, I said. Or the upkeep. Yes, I do. I checked last month. You checked because you wanted numbers to justify your decision. She slammed the folder shut. This is going nowhere. You are being stubborn for no reason. No, I said, I simply know more than you think I do. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. The first of the morning. What's that supposed to mean? It means you should have read the county records before you printed these papers. She frowned. I did. Everything matches. No, Lindsay, it doesn't. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I motioned toward the packet she'd pushed across the table. For someone who prides herself on being thorough, you overlooked a crucial point. This house and the land it sits on aren't the same property. She hesitated. When I sat down slowly, letting the truth settle between us like dust. The house was added to the original deed 32 years ago, but the land, the full acreage, is older, and its legal classification hasn't changed since the day Tom and I bought it, so she snapped. So I said, the sale of the house does not automatically include the land, not without the landowner's explicit consent. She stared at me as if trying to translate a language she didn't speak. You're the landowner, she said. Obviously. I shook my head. I'm the sole landowner. No secondary signatures allowed, no transferable rights, no implicit inheritance. She blinked again, slower this time. That's impossible, Dad. Your father insisted on it. My voice softened, not for her sake, but for his memory. He wanted the land protected. He made the lawyer draft it that way. She swallowed. I didn't see any of that in the documents. You didn't see them, I corrected gently, because you've never seen the real ones. Her face drained of color. Then what was in the lockbox? Things I didn't mind you finding. The silence that followed was thick and heavy and honest. For the first time, Lindsay realized she didn't have control. Not last night, not this morning, not ever. I watched her stare at the papers she'd printed, her whole plan unraveling one thread at a time. She wasn't ready for the truth, but she would face it soon enough. The land was mine. The house was mine. And every decision she thought she'd made for me was nothing more than an illusion she built to hide from her own fear of losing control. She'd spent the night preparing her version of the future, but the truth, my truth, was about to start its own morning. I waited until Lindsay left the kitchen before moving toward the hallway. My joints ached from the long night, but something steadier pushed me forward. A kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. The quiet confidence that comes when truth is no longer a burden, but a shield. The house was still. Morning light filtered through the curtains, warming the floorboards Tom laid himself. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, listening. Lindsay was in the guest room, pacing short, sharp steps, a woman recalculating her strategy. She believed she'd cornered me. She didn't know I'd spent months preparing for this moment. People think aging makes you slow, but if you've lived long enough, you learn to move invisibly, in decisions, not steps. I walked to the hall closet. The door gave its usual little sigh when I opened it. Behind the winter coats, behind the wooden crate of old photo albums, was a narrow panel in the wall, painted the same color, almost invisible, unless you knew to look. Tom had built it the year after Lindsay moved out. Every house needs a private pocket, he said, tapping the panel with a wink. A place no one thinks to question. Inside the panel was a shallow shelf, and on that shelf lay a leather folder, soft with age edges, worn from the number of times my fingers had traced it. My real documents, the ones Lindsay never knew existed. I pulled it out carefully and closed the panel. It clicked back into place like a secret. Exhaling at the kitchen table, I opened the folder. The papers inside smelled faintly of cedar. Tom used to keep a block of it in our desk drawer. I touched the corner of the land deed, remembering the day we signed it. We just finished digging the drainage ditch along the west edge of the property. My back was hurting. Tom's shirt was soaked with sweat. We looked nothing like people buying land, but we were young, stubborn, determined. This folder held everything that proved Lindsay's plans were nothing but wishful thinking. The deed, the trust documents, the updated legal instructions I filed after Tom died. None of it required a second signature. None of it could be altered by anyone but me. and there was one more paper inside the one I'd hoped I'd never have to use. A notarized statement confirming that any attempt by family to coerce, manipulate, or control my living situation would automatically revoke them from inheritance. My lawyer insisted on it. Protect yourself from hypothetical futures, he said. They have a way of becoming real. I didn't understand back then. This morning I did. Footsteps sounded at the top of the stairs. Lindsay was coming down, her voice firm, rehearsed. "Mom, we need to finish this conversation." I closed the folder calmly and set it on the table. She entered the kitchen, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. Her gaze went straight to the folder. "What's that?" "My documents," I said. She frowned. "The ones in the lockbox were decoys. These are the real ones." Her face tightened. "Mom, don't play games." "It isn't a game," I said quietly. "It's my life, my home, my land." She stepped closer, gripping the back of a chair. "I don't know what you think you're proving, but I'm trying to help you. You're not thinking clearly. Funny how quickly adult children use that line when they realize they've miscalculated." I opened the folder and turned it toward her. The deed lay on top. My name alone in bold ink. Lindsay stared at it, her mouth tightening. "That doesn't mean anything," she said weakly. "It can be amended." "No," I said, "it can't." She swallowed, her confidence thinning. "You don't know that." "I had the lawyer drafted that way," Tom insisted. My voice softened, but only briefly. He didn't want the land touched unless it was my decision, only mine. Her breath pitched, not grief, but frustration. "You've been hiding this from me." "No," I said, "I've been protecting it." The words hung between us, solid, undeniable. For a moment she didn't speak. Her hands tightened on the chair until her knuckles whitened. She looked like a woman watching her entire plan tilt out of reach. "Mom," she whispered, a new edge in her voice. "What exactly are you planning to do?" I closed the folder gently. "The same thing I've always done," I said. "Live my life in my home on my land." And for the first time since she locked that bedroom door, Lindsay understood she wasn't the one in control. Lindsay didn't sit right away. She hovered behind the chair, fingers clutching the wooden back as if it were the last solid thing in the room. Her eyes flicked between my face and the folder, searching for an angle she hadn't tried yet. "Mom," she finally said, her voice slow, measured. "We're getting carried away. This..." She gestured toward the documents. "This is unnecessary. I didn't come here to fight with you." "No," I answered. "You came to decide for me." Her jaw tightened. "You're twisting everything." I shook my head. "I'm describing everything." For a moment, neither of us breathed. Old houses, no tension. The air thickened until even the walls seemed to lean in. Lindsay pulled the chair out and sat stiffly. She rested her palms on the table, flattening them as if trying to anchor the conversation. "Let's start over." Her tone softened, but it wasn't softness born of love. It was strategy. "I shouldn't have locked you in your room. That was too much." I looked at her. "Too much," I repeated quietly, as though tasting the words. "You locked your mother in a room because she disagreed with your plans. That isn't too much, Lindsay. That's a boundary crossing so deep you don't even see it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I was trying to prevent you from hurting yourself. I wasn't the one hurting me," I said. She flinched at that. The smallest betrayal in her face, but real. Then, like someone catching themselves slipping, she straightened her shoulders. "This property is overwhelming you whether you admit it or not. You can't keep going like this. You need help. Help is what you offer when someone asks." I replied. "Control is what you take when they don't." Lindsay's eyes hardened. "So, you think everything I'm doing is selfish?" I didn't answer right away. I let the truth settle like dust. "I think everything you're doing is about you," I said at last. "Not my safety, not my well-being. You're afraid I'll make choices you can't influence. That's not fair. It's accurate. She pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping the floor sharply. Fine, then tell me what you think is really happening here. I folded my hands on the table. You're afraid, I said softly. Afraid of your marriage falling apart. Afraid of bills you can't pay. Afraid of the life you built standing on unsteady ground. And instead of dealing with your own fear, you're trying to secure a future using something that doesn't belong to you. She stared at me as if I'd slapped her. I don't need your land, she snapped. You need control, I corrected. And you thought taking mine would give you some. Her throat worked. A tiny tremor ran through her fingers. It was the first honest thing about her this morning. I'm your daughter, she whispered. I should be the one helping you. You should be the one caring for me, I replied. Those are not the same things. Silence stretched between us again, long, thin, unblinking. Then Lindsay reached for the folder. I placed my hand on it before she could touch it. No. She froze fingers inches from the leather. You don't get to handle this, I said quietly. Not anymore. Her voice cracked, sharp and brittle. Why are you doing this to me? To you, I repeated, the bitterness rising but controlled. Lindsay, you locked me in my own bedroom. You tried to take my keys. You looked through my private papers. And you planned to move me out of my home without my consent. Why are you asking what I'm doing to you? Ask yourself what you've been doing to me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She wasn't used to hearing the truth spoken without apology. You raised me to be strong, she finally said, eyes shining with anger rather than emotion. You taught me to take action. Now you're punishing me for it. No, I said. I'm stopping you. That's different. Her breathing grew uneven. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice as if we were negotiating something delicate. You don't understand how much is at stake. I understand exactly. I said you wanted to reshape your life using mine as the foundation, but I'm not your foundation. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your resource. I'm your mother. Those last words seemed to hit her harder than anything else. Mothers are supposed to want what's best for their children, she murmured. And children, I answered, are supposed to remember their mothers are human beings. Her composure cracked just for a second. She turned her head away, blinking fast. I couldn't tell if it was shame or resentment, maybe both. But when she looked back at me, the softness was gone. Something colder had taken its place. Mom, she said, her voice shaking but controlled. You're making a mistake you'll regret. I shook my head slowly. No, Lindsay. The only mistake I made was letting this go on as long as I did. And in that moment, she understood that the morning she planned the victory she expected was slipping farther from her reach with every truth I spoke. The knock at the front door came so softly I wasn't even sure I'd heard it. Lindsay heard it too. Her head jerked toward the hallway, eyes narrowing. No one was expected. Not this early. Not today. Stay here, she said sharply, as if I were a child she needed to contain. But I didn't stay. I rose slowly, steadying my hand on the table, and followed her into the hall. My knees protested, but my resolve did not. Lindsay opened the door only a few inches. What are you doing here? She snapped. A familiar voice answered, uneasy but polite. Mom said you were both here. I wanted to check in. My heart lifted just slightly. It was Haley. She stepped inside before Lindsay could block her, the cold morning air swirling in behind her. She looked tired. Students always do, but her eyes brightened when they found me. Grandma. She hurried over, touching my arm gently. You didn't answer your phone last night. I got worried. Lindsay closed the door with a hard click. We were discussing private family matters. Haley glanced between us. She wasn't naive. She saw tension the way young people see cracks in pavement. clearly instinctively. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Lindsay exhaled loudly. "Nothing happened. Grandma is just confused about a few things, and I'm trying to straighten them out." "Confused?" I repeated, letting the words settle into the air like dust. Interesting choice. Haley's brows drew together. "Are you okay?" I looked at her. Really. Looked at the gentle concern in her face, the earnestness Lindsay once had before life hardened her edges. And for the first time since last night, my chest loosened. "I'm fine," I said, "but a few things have happened." Lindsay stepped between us. "Mom, don't start this. Haley doesn't need to be dragged into something she doesn't understand." Haley crossed her arms. The same stubborn gesture her grandfather used when someone lied to him. "I'm 22, not 2, and you're the one talking over her." Lindsay bristled. "Don't take that tone with me." Haley didn't back down. She looked at me again. "Grandma, what did she do?" My daughter froze. She understood I wasn't going to lie to protect her pride. "She locked me in my bedroom last night," I said softly. Haley's face drained of color, then flushed with outrage. "She what?" Lindsay's response came too quickly. "It wasn't like that." "How else is it?" Haley demanded. "Grandma, is that true?" I nodded. A sharp breath escaped her. She turned on her mother. "Are you out of your mind?" Lindsay's eyes flashed with panic. Real panic. For the first time. "You don't understand the situation. Your grandmother is not thinking clearly. She's overwhelmed. I talked to her yesterday." Haley interrupted. "She seemed clearer than you ever do when you're stressed." That stung Lindsay. I saw it. Haley moved closer to me, lowering her voice. "Did she take anything else? Your phone? Your keys?" "Yes," I said. Haley's hands trembled with anger. "Mom, this is insane. You can't treat her like this." "She's exaggerating," Lindsay said quickly, voice rising. "This is exactly why I didn't want you involved. You always take her side." Her side. Haley's voice cracked, not from weakness, but disbelief. "There shouldn't be sides, and you locked her in a room." Lindsay held her forehead as if Haley's logic physically pained her. "I'm trying to take care of her. You don't know how hard this has been on me." "There it is," murmured. Haley heard me. Lindsay pretended not to. Haley stepped toward the kitchen. "I'm calling Aunt Marie and maybe a lawyer. I don't know what's going on, but you can't. You're not calling anyone." Lindsay snapped, grabbing her arm. That was her mistake. Haley pulled back sharply, eyes wide. "Do not touch me like that." Something shifted then, not loudly but deeply like the foundation of a house, settling after years of strain. Lindsay realized she was outnumbered. But more than that, she realized the illusion she'd built of being the rational caretaker was crumbling. Haley turned to me again, voice gentler. "Grandma, tell me everything, all of it." I looked at her, at the sincerity, the readiness, the fierce love she thought she had to hide to not upset her mother. And I understood Tom had been right. Roots matter. Some travel farther, some stay true. I rested my hand over hers. "We'll talk," I said softly, but not here. Not with emotions flaring. Behind us, Lindsay let out a shaky breath, half frustration, half fear. "Haley," she said, voice small for the first time, "don't let her twist things. I am your mother, and she's my grandmother." Haley replied, her tone flat honest. "The difference is only one of you treated me like family today." Lindsay's face faltered, and the morning which she believed would give her leverage was suddenly slipping out of her grasp entirely. Haley followed me into the living room while Lindsay stayed rooted in the hallway as if moving might make everything worse. Maybe she finally understood it already had. I lowered myself into the armchair near the window. Haley sat on the edge of the couch, leaning forward, her eyes searching my face. "Grandma, what exactly happened last night? I didn't rush. I spoke the way older women do when the truth has been sitting inside them too long. Slowly, evenly, without dramatics. Your mother locked me in my bedroom, I said. Took my keys, took my phone, went through my papers. She said it was for my safety. Haley's jaw tightened. That's not safety. That's control. I nodded once. Yes. Her hands curled into fists in her lap. I can't believe she would do that. You can, I said gently. You simply didn't want to. She swallowed hard. Does she know you know everything about the buyer? The papers. She knows now. Haley leaned back, exhaling slowly. The truth was settling onto her shoulders, heavy but necessary. But why, she asked quietly. Why would she go this far, fear I said. And the belief that her vision of the future matters more than my present. Haley shook her head. That doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. It explains it. People excuse themselves with explanations. She stared at the floor, her breath uneven. She was angry, but underneath that anger was something softer. Hurt. A daughter realizing her mother wasn't the person she thought. I remembered feeling that once too, though under very different circumstances. Haley finally looked up. What did she plan to do today? Present me with paperwork, I said. Convince me to move out, sell the property, sign things she prepared without my knowledge. Haley's face tightened. She thought you'd just agree. She thought I was manageable. I met her eyes. She forgot I've lived 74 years managing myself. For a moment, Haley smiled. A small, sad smile, but real. Then it faded. What happens now? She asked. Before I could answer, Lindsay appeared in the doorway. She didn't enter the room. She hovered there, arms crossed, eyes red but defiant. Are you done poisoning her against me? She asked quietly. I didn't respond. Haley did. No one poisoned me, she said. I'm listening. Something you didn't do. Lindsay flinched, but didn't reply. She looked at Haley the way people look at someone who used to be predictable, but no longer is. Mom, Lindsay said, directing her gaze at me now. Whatever narrative you're spinning, it won't change the fact that you need help and you need control, I said calmly. We're both telling the truth. Her eyes glossed with anger or maybe shame. Hard to tell. Haley rose from the couch. Mom, you hurt her. You can't pretend you didn't. I was trying to protect her by locking her up. Haley's voice cracked and the room fell utterly still. If Dad did that to you, you'd call the police. Lindsay opened her mouth, closed, it opened it again. No defense came. That silence was more honest than anything she'd said all morning. Haley stepped closer to me. Grandma, do you want me to stay or call someone, or I want you to sit? I answered softly. I want you to breathe. She sat. Lindsay's voice came again, smaller now. Mom, please don't do this. Don't make this bigger than it is. I looked at her. My daughter, a woman who no longer recognized the boundaries of love. It already is bigger, I said. You made it so the moment you turned the key. Haley's eyes filled, though she blinked the tears back quickly. Lindsay looked at her daughter the way someone looks at a door they suddenly realize they can't open. For the first time since the night began, I felt something inside me settle. Not peace, not victory, just the quiet knowledge that the truth had finally stepped into the room, and none of us could pretend not to see it. I reached for the leather folder again, not to flaunt it, but because truth sometimes needs paper to stand on. Lindsay watched my hand tense as a cornered animal unsure whether to fight or retreat. Sit, I said quietly. She didn't move. Haley took a single step toward her mother. Just sit down. Lindsay relented, lowering herself slowly into the chair across from me. Her shoulders hunched slightly as if the weight of the morning had settled there. I opened the folder and pulled out the deed. The thick official paper lay flat against the table edges, worn by years of being touched, but never surrendered. This, I said, sliding it toward her, is the land deed the full acreage. Your father and I signed it 40 years ago. It was amended after his death. My lawyer updated it exactly as he would have wanted. Lindsay didn't touch it. She stared at her reflection in the glossy wood of the table instead. What does it prove? She murmured. It proves, I answered steadily, that everything you planned last night was built on assumptions and none of them match reality. I pulled out the second document the trust paper notarized firm. This states that the property cannot be evaluated, transferred, or encumbered without my explicit voluntary consent. No representative signatures, no family proxies, no safety reallocations, only me. Haley inhaled sharply. Lindsay's face hardened a small twitch, pulling at the corner of her mouth. You hid this, she said. I protected it, I corrected. There's a difference. Her gaze snapped to mine. From me? Yes. The word hung in the air like a bell stroke. Undeniable echoing. Final. Haley shifted closer to me, her hand brushing my arm, lightly grounding me. Lindsay noticed. Something in her expression flickered. Envy. Maybe loss. Certainly. I took out the last page from the folder, the one my lawyer insisted on, the one I signed, with a heavy heart months ago. This document, I said, tapping the top, revokes inheritance rights if coercion, manipulation, or attempts to force relocation are used against me. Lindsay's breath caught. What, it's legal, I said, and enforceable. You're threatening me, she whispered. No, I said. I'm informing you. You crossed a line last night. I want there to be no confusion about it. Her face twisted anger, trying to swallow shame. I was trying to help you. Everything I did was to help you. You locked me in a room, I said softly. People don't help out of fear. They help out of love. What you did wasn't love, Haley whispered. Mom, you can't argue that. But Lindsay didn't look at her. She looked only at me, eyes burning. I'm your daughter, she said, voice raw. How can you put something like that on paper? Because, I answered gently, I know human nature and I know you. And I needed to protect myself from any future where desperation might override compassion. Lindsay trembled, not dramatically, but subtly, the way strong people shake when they realize their strength was never aimed at the right thing. You think I'm a monster, she said quietly. No, I replied. I think you're lost, and you tried to drag me with you. A tear slipped down her cheek, surprising us both. She wiped it away angrily. Haley looked at her mother, really looked, and whispered, Mom, you heard her, and she's telling you the truth. Lindsay's breathing turned shallow. Her voice cracked around the edges. I didn't mean I didn't think that I said softly. Is the problem? You didn't think. You only decided. She stared at the documents, the physical evidence that her imagined authority was nothing but vapor. Mom, she whispered, what do you want me to do? I closed the folder. Except, I said that my life is mine and my home stays with me. And for the first time, Lindsay had no words at all. Lindsay stayed seated, but her posture changed. Her back no longer straight, her shoulders no longer squared. She looked smaller, not in age, but in certainty, as if she finally understood. The ground beneath her wasn't as level as she'd believed. Mom, she said, her voice low, almost trembling. I didn't come here to fight you. I came because I'm scared. Everything feels like it's falling apart, and I needed to fix at least one thing. And you chose me, I replied gently, because I was the easiest thing to rearrange. Her breath hitched. No, I chose you because you're my mother, and that title, I said, doesn't give you ownership. Something in her eyes broke open then, not wide, but enough. Vulnerability. Real and raw, showed itself for a brief moment, before she pushed it back down where no one could reach it. Haley stood quietly near the door, arms folded. Not defensive, protective. She wasn't taking sides. She was witnessing truth. Sometimes that's harder. Lindsay finally leaned forward, elbows on the table, palms pressed to her temples. You don't know what it's been like. The house payment, the insurance, the college loans. Those are your responsibilities, I said softly. Not mine. She winced. I know that. But knowing and managing are two different things. And sometimes it feels like everything is balancing on the edge of a knife. I let her speak, not to excuse, but to understand. Even at 74, it's possible to listen without surrendering. I thought if I could handle this one thing, she continued, if I could get the house sold and move you somewhere safe, I wouldn't have to worry anymore. I wouldn't have to feel like I'm failing at everything. And you believed, I said, that taking control of my life would restore control in yours. Lindsay's chin trembled. She didn't deny it. For a moment, I saw the child she used to be, the one who hid behind my skirt during thunderstorms because she didn't like the sound of the sky breaking. But the woman in front of me wasn't hiding, she was justifying. Mom, I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. But you did, I replied, and that's what matters now. She pressed her lips together, fighting tears she didn't want Haley to see. Haley, meanwhile, watched her mother with a mixture of confusion, anger, and something softer, grief for the mother. She thought she had. Let me ask you something, I said quietly. Last night when you took my keys, when you locked my door, what did you think would happen this morning? She swallowed. I thought you'd calm down, that you'd see reason. No, I said, you thought I'd surrender. Her face tightened. She didn't speak because the truth didn't leave room for protest. Lindsay, I continued, you crossed a line that isn't easily uncrossed. When you treat someone you love as an obstacle, something fundamental breaks. Haley nodded slowly. Lindsay noticed, and something like shame flickered again. I wanted to help, Lindsay murmured. Help, I repeated softly. By erasing my autonomy, she finally met my eyes. Her voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. But it wasn't apology rooted in understanding. It was apology rooted in fear of consequences. And I knew the difference. Any mother does. Sorry isn't enough, Haley said quietly from behind her. You have to stop deciding for her. Lindsay turned to her daughter, wounded. I was thinking of all of us and forgetting one of us. Haley answered. Another tear slid down Lindsay's cheek. She brushed it away quickly, but not quickly enough. Mom, she whispered, I don't know how to fix this. You fix it, I said, by letting go of what was never yours to hold. Lindsay drew a shaky breath, the kind a person takes when their world shifts in a way they cannot reverse. She'd pushed me into a corner last night, believing a locked door could keep truth out. But today, sitting at my kitchen table with the documents in front of her and her daughter behind her, she realized something she should have known all along. You cannot force a woman to surrender what she built with her own hands and her own life. And you cannot lock dignity behind a door. Lindsay sat completely still, elbows on her knees, hands clasped under her chin. Her breathing was shallow, uneven the way it gets when you know the conversation has crossed into territory where nothing will return to normal. Haley stood at my side now, not shielding me, not confronting her mother, simply present, and that alone changed the shape of the room. Mom, Lindsay said finally, her voice cracking around the edges. I said I'm sorry. What else do you want from me? I looked at her quietly. For years, I had filled the silence between us with explanations, reassurances, excuses for her behavior. Today, I let the silence speak for itself. What do I want? I repeated. I want my daughter back, but I don't think she's in this room. Lindsay flinched, but she didn't argue. She could feel it too. The distance she had built brick by brick, decision by decision, until she no longer knew how far she had wandered. "I can try harder," she whispered. "I can do better." "You could," I said gently, but not while standing in my house planning my removal. Haley's breath caught quietly. Lindsay lowered her gaze. "You don't trust me," she said. I shook my head. "Trust isn't something you demand. It's something you honor. And last night you broke it." Her voice rose, not loud, but desperate. "So what now? You just cut me out after everything I've done for you." Haley stiffened at that, but I raised my hand slightly. This part had to come from me. "Lindsay," I said, "you haven't been doing things for me. You've been doing things to me." She swallowed hard. "I didn't mean I know," I said, "but impact matters more than intention." Tears finally spilled. She wiped them furiously as if crying meant losing ground. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "You almost did," I replied, "and the only way forward is distance." Her head jerked up. "Distance, yes." My voice didn't waver. "For now, I need you to leave my home." The silence that followed was the kind that settles deep in the bones. Not shock, not anger, but recognition. She understood I wasn't speaking in metaphor. "You're kicking me out," she said, stunned. "I'm asking you," I corrected, "to give me space to think, to breathe, to heal from what happened." Lindsay stared at me, then at Haley as if hoping for an ally, but Haley's eyes were steady. "Mom," Haley said softly, "you need to go. Let Grandma have her home back." "I didn't take her home," Lindsay whispered. Haley answered for me. "You tried." That truth shattered the last illusion Lindsay had been clinging to. She stood slowly as if her body had aged 10 years in a moment. She looked around the room, the photos on the wall, the old clock on the mantel, the quilt draped over the armchair, as if seeing for the first time that none of it belonged to her. "Will you call me?" she asked quietly. "When I'm ready," I said. "And when you're ready to listen instead of deciding." She nodded once, a small, broken motion, then picked up her bag. At the doorway, she paused. "I didn't want it to end like this," she said. "It hasn't ended," I replied, "but it cannot continue as it was." Her eyes filled again, but she didn't cry this time. She walked out, closing the door behind her with a soft, defeated click. Haley stood very still. The house was quiet in a new way. Not fearful, not tense, just relieved. She turned toward me, her expression full of something I hadn't felt for my daughter in years. Genuine concern. "Grandma, are you all right?" I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Yes," I said for the first time in a long while. "Yes." And in the lingering silence, I understood. Removing someone isn't the hardest part. Realizing you waited too long to do it, that's what stings. But dignity reclaimed is dignity restored. And my home finally felt like mine again. After Lindsay left, the house exhaled. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with that subtle shift old homes make when tension no longer presses against their walls. I sat for a moment at the kitchen table, my fingers resting lightly on the closed leather folder. Haley hovered nearby, unsure whether to sit or stand, like someone afraid to disturb a fragile balance. "Grandma," she said gently, "you don't have to deal with all of this alone." I gave her a small smile. "I know, but I also know I'm capable." She nodded, though worry still clung to her expression. She had witnessed enough to understand the weight of the morning. "I need to call my attorney," I said. Haley blinked, surprised. "Right now, yes. If something is broken, you reinforce it before the crack widens." She didn't argue. She just handed me my phone, the one Lindsay had taken, now retrieved from her abandoned tote bag. For a moment, I held it in my palm, feeling its simple, familiar weight. Funny how something so small could symbolize so much. Autonomy, safety, the ability to reach out. I dialed the attorney's office. They knew my voice. They didn't make me explain more than necessary. Yes, I said calmly. I need to update the trust in the inheritance clause, and I want to review the emergency power of attorney instructions. Haley's eyebrows lifted, impressed but not surprised. When I hung up, she asked softly, "Are you changing your will?" "I'm clarifying it," I corrected. "There's a difference." She hesitated. "Because of Mom, because of reality." I said, "Your mother made choices yesterday that revealed truths I can't ignore. Love doesn't erase responsibility." Haley lowered her gaze, tracing the grain of the wood table with her finger. I don't understand how she thought she had the right. People confuse their fear with entitlement, I said, and they confuse their intentions with permission. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the house settle again. A bird chirped outside. Life moved on, indifferent to our human storms. I opened the folder one more time and laid out the papers, the deed, the trust, the notarized amendment protecting me from coercion. I added one more sheet, a new durable power of attorney document the lawyer mailed me months ago. It needed only one signature to take effect. I slid it toward Haley. She looked up sharply. "Grandma, no, you don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you." I said, "I'm doing it for me. You listen. You don't push. You don't decide for me." That is exactly the kind of person I can trust with responsibility I hope neither of us will ever need. Haley swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" "Completely." Her eyes shone, not with pride, but something deeper. Something... gratitude, maybe. Or a kind of humility Lindsay had misplaced long ago. She signed a small signature, but steady. No tremor of ego, no rush, just respect. I placed the papers back into the folder, closed it, and tied the leather strap. A symbolic act, yes, but also a final one. Haley exhaled softly. What happens with Mom now? I looked out the window at the land Tom and I once worked with our bare hands. 40 years of mourn storms, planting seasons, and a lifetime of knowing what truly belonged to me. She needs time, I said. Time to understand what she crossed. Time to face her own life without leaning on mine. "And you?" Haley asked. "I need peace," I answered. "This house deserves it, and so do I." We sat quietly together. No rush, no fear, no locked doors. Just two women, one old enough to have lived several lives, one young enough to learn from them, sharing a space returned to its rightful balance. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something being taken from me. It felt like something I had reclaimed. The afternoon light stretched long across the living room floor, warm and steady. The kind of light that doesn't demand anything, only offers. Haley had gone upstairs to change the sheets in the guest room, insisting I deserved a peaceful night after the one I'd endured. I let her not because I needed the help, but because sometimes accepting kindness is its own kind of strength. I walked slowly to the front door and opened it. The air outside smelled of cut grass and damp earth. The scents Tom always said were the breath of honest land. The elm tree cast its familiar shadow across the yard, swaying slightly, as if greeting me. For years, I'd wondered whether I was getting too old to keep tending this place. Now I realized it wasn't the land I doubted. It was the people who wanted to take it from me. I stepped onto the porch, letting my hand rest on the wooden railing Tom sanded himself. The grain was smooth under my palm, as comforting as an old friend. So much of my life had been lived here. Celebrations, arguments, silences, recoveries. This house had witnessed all the versions of me. The young wife, the tired mother, the grieving widow, and now the woman who had finally drawn a boundary deep enough to hold. Behind me, I heard Haley's footsteps. She joined me on the porch, hands tucked into her sweater sleeves. "It's beautiful out here," she said softly. "It always has been," I replied. I just forgot to see it clearly for a while. We stood side by side watching a bird swoop low over the field. The quiet felt different today. Not the heavy quiet of fear, but the familiar quiet of belonging. "Do you think Mom will call?" Haley asked. "Yes," I said, "but not today." "Will you answer?" "When she calls to listen," I said, "not when she calls to decide." Haley nodded. She didn't try to defend her mother or condemn her. She simply understood a sign she had grown into her own womanhood without losing empathy. "You were brave today," she said after a pause. "No," I answered. I was finally honest. Bravery is something else entirely. She smiled. It felt like bravery. I didn't argue. Some truths belong to the people who witness them. Inside the house, the clock chimed. A soft, steady sound that marked time not as something slipping away, but as something continuing. I felt the weight of the morning lift gently from my shoulders. Not gone. No. Memories rarely vanish but transformed into something I could carry without bending. "I'm proud of you," Haley said suddenly. I turned to her. "For what?" "For choosing yourself," she said. "Most people your age don't. They let others make decisions because it's easier." I looked back at the land stretching out in front of me, golden under the late sun. Easier doesn't always mean better. I said your mother forgot that I won't. We stood there until the light shifted cooler, until the breeze brushed our faces like a reminder that evenings still belonged to me. This home still belonged to me. My choices, my dignity, my name on the land, all still mine. And as I closed the door behind us, something inside me settled completely. Not triumph, not revenge, just the quiet, steady sense of a woman returning to herself. My life had not been taken. It had simply been waiting for me to reclaim it. And I finally had. If my story resonated with you, leave a comment or follow. Your voice matters too.